Have you ever wondered why some people can make others feel unsettled simply by being silent? They don't yell, they don't justify, they don't even react. They simply withdraw. And then, something strange happens. The energy in the room shifts. Those around them begin to feel the absence, begin to question, worry, even try to pull them back. Imagine if you did the same. If you stopped replying to messages immediately, stopped nodding at every request, stopped reacting instinctively. If you chose silence instead of outbursts, withdrawal instead of confrontation, what would happen? The answer is, everything would change. Those who are used to controlling your emotions wouldn't know how to handle you. Those who thought they could read you would suddenly realize they don't know you at all. And that is when you begin to reclaim your power. Since childhood, we are taught to be kind, to listen, to always be there when someone needs us. But no one teaches us how to protect our personal boundaries. No one tells us that if you are always available, you become a free pillar of support, something people come to only when they need. Gradually, you become a convenient tool for others, while you yourself become drained, tired, and empty. Carl Jung called the process of returning to your true self individuation, the journey of becoming whole, autonomous, and profound. But that journey only begins when you stop reacting unconsciously, when you learn to say no without guilt, when you choose silence without feeling weak, and when you dare to withdraw not because you are running away, but because you are redefining yourself. Have you ever felt stuck in the role of the nice person? You always reply to messages, always explain your actions, always try to keep the peace, even when it chokes you inside. That is not love. That is abandoning yourself. That is how you trade your life energy in exchange for others' approval. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, every time you respond even when you're exhausted, every time you try to please someone, you are giving away a part of your energy. And then by the end of the day, you feel tired, confused, empty, and you don't know why. Because you are too available. And you know what? Being too available is not a virtue. It is a trap. A psychological prison you lock yourself in. Because when you are always present, people take it for granted. No one values what is too easy to get. When you are always there, you become a tool, an emotional button others press whenever they need attention, listening, or just to vent. Carl Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the darkness you need to face is your inner fear. The fear of being abandoned, the fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being seen as selfish. But you need to overcome those fears to begin saying, "I choose peace." You don't need to explain why you withdrew. You don't need to apologize for choosing silence. Your absence will speak for itself. And to those who used to see you as an emotional tool, that absence is unbearable. Because they are used to manipulating you through emotion, through reaction. But now, you've stopped reacting. You are silent. And with that, they lose their power. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the declaration of someone who understands the value of inner energy. It is selection. Not everyone deserves a reaction from you. Not every argument is worth your presence. Not every relationship is worth maintaining. You begin to understand. Your presence is a gift, not an obligation. And then you realize something. When you are no longer easily accessible, your value rises. Those who once overlooked you, who took you for granted, begin to see you as someone special. Not because you tried to prove anything, but because you stopped showing up everywhere, every time. Silence makes others reflect. When you are no longer a reactive mirror, they are forced to confront themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. They may criticize you, call you cold, distant, even selfish. But that's not the truth about you. It's a reflection of their own insecurity. Are you willing to endure being misunderstood in exchange for freedom? Are you brave enough to withdraw, not out of fear, but out of love for yourself? Silence, when it comes from awareness, is not absence. It is the deepest form of presence. That is the moment you step out of the old role, leave behind the emotional games, and return to your true self. A self that needs no validation, no permission. A self that knows who it is, and knows it does not need to always be available. Have you ever wondered why there are days when you don't do anything physically demanding, yet still feel completely exhausted? You didn't run. You didn't lift heavy objects. You simply talked, listened, responded to messages, tried to please others. And by the end of the day, you felt drained, tired, lost, confused. That's not physical fatigue. It's the result of continuous leakage from something precious yet invisible. Psychic energy. Carl Jung called it psychic energy, the stream of energy that flows through our mind and emotions. And what's scary is, we can't see it, can't measure it, can't track it on a chart. But every time you react, every time you get pulled into someone else's emotions, every time you try to maintain a certain image in someone's eyes, you lose a piece of that energy. Think back to the last time you were angry. Maybe someone criticized you or said something unfair. The natural reflex is to defend yourself, to argue, to protect your ego. But after that confrontation, how did you feel? Relieved? Or more likely, tired, empty, with lingering frustration? Jung believed that these unconscious reactions are the biggest sources of psychic energy leakage. And there's more. Those times when you tried so hard to explain yourself, the messages you sent while confused, the times you wondered, did I do something wrong? Why are they silent? Should I say something? All those questions, those endless internal dialogues, consume your mental energy piece by piece. We often assume that only physical action makes us tired. But in truth, constant overthinking, stirred emotions, and unfiltered reactions are the real culprits behind our deepest exhaustion. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." You might find yourself falling into the same interaction patterns, always the fixer, the explainer, the appeaser. You think it's your personality. But perhaps it's just an unconscious cycle, repeating over and over, and each cycle costs you more of your energy. The issue here isn't that you're weak. It's that you haven't yet learned how to contain your energy. You may not realize that, like money, psychic energy must be spent wisely. If you don't, you'll always feel depleted without knowing why. So the question becomes, how do we protect our psychic energy? The answer isn't about running away from the world. It's about changing how you respond to it. Instead of replying to messages instantly, you can pause. Instead of over-explaining, you can choose silence. Instead of trying to make others understand you, you can focus on understanding yourself. When you stop reacting impulsively, you begin to conserve energy. When you stop getting pulled into every story, every conflict, you begin to master your internal flow. Carl Jung also said, "A healthy soul is one that knows how to keep energy within the system." Imagine your psychic energy as electricity. When you allow it to leak through every useless emotion, every unworthy person, every unnecessary situation, you'll soon feel weak, directionless, and easily manipulated. On the other hand, when you learn to say no at the right time, withdraw when needed, stay silent when it's not worth speaking, you start sealing those leaks. You're reinforcing your internal energy system, and that's the first step to reclaiming inner power. Here's the irony. When you stop reacting, you don't disappear. You become more substantial. Silence at the right moment makes your words afterward more powerful. Not showing up all the time makes your presence more valuable, like a rare gem, not because it sparkles, but because it is rare. But you need courage. Because stopping your reactions might make others uncomfortable. They were used to you being easy, predictable. When you no longer play that role, they might criticize you, even attack you. But remember, that is their reaction, not your responsibility. You are not here to make others feel comfortable. You are here to keep your inner world grounded. Let your energy become intentional. Every thought you hold back is an act of strength. Every time you stay silent at the right moment, you nurture your awareness. You don't have to react to everything. You don't have to prove you're right. You just need to know your worth and protect your energy. That is true freedom. That is silent strength. Have you ever met someone who made you feel guilty, even though they didn't say anything harsh? Or someone who made you feel like you had to apologize, had to explain yourself, even though you did nothing wrong? That's not a coincidence. It's the result of one of the deepest psychological mechanisms Carl Jung ever explored: projection. Projection is the process by which people unconsciously push the parts of themselves they don't want to face onto others. Negative emotions, flaws, rejected parts of the ego. Instead of acknowledging them, they see them in others. They get angry at someone's selfishness. But in truth, they are selfish. They criticize others for being cold. But they've never truly opened up themselves. And if you're someone who is highly sensitive, always willing to listen and endure, you become the perfect mirror for their shadows. They need someone to blame. You're the one always apologizing. They need someone to feel superior to. You're the one always yielding. They need someone to avoid facing themselves. You're the one always reacting. And it all begins with something seemingly small. You react too quickly. Reaction is fertile ground for manipulation. When someone knows you'll immediately explain yourself, apologize, or try to fix things, they only need to stay silent or offer a subtle hint of blame. The rest, you handle on your own. You blame yourself, punish yourself, try to repair what wasn't broken. You become a victim in a game you didn't even know you were playing. Jung once said, "We don't see people as they are. We see them as we are." And that's a frightening truth. When others project their shadow onto you, they don't need to raise their voice. They don't need harsh words. They just need to stay silent, gently withdraw, create the impression that you've done something wrong, and you'll step right back into your old role. The pleaser, the fearful one, the fixer. Worse still, you begin to believe that this image is you, that you are truly selfish, that you truly need to change, that you are the problem. But that's not you. That is an imposed image, shaped by projection. When you realize this, something remarkable happens. You stop reacting. You begin to step back, observe, ask questions. Is this my feeling? Or is this someone else's shadow being projected onto me? And in that exact moment, the game of manipulation begins to collapse. The person who used to make you feel guilty with just a look no longer affects you. The one who made you feel you had to explain no longer sways you. The one who thought they had control over you now grows confused, because they realize you've stopped reacting. Your silence becomes an empty space where their projections can no longer land. And that makes them uncomfortable, because now they are forced to look at themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Enlightenment doesn't come by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And the light begins to shine when you dare to sit in the dark, when you no longer respond with old reflexes, when you no longer feel the need to justify, when you are no longer controlled by the need to be understood, loved, or kept. You begin to see yourself more clearly, and you begin to see others more clearly. Your silence is not withdrawal, it is mastery. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need validation. You just need to be honest with your real emotions and hold your inner stillness. This is not easy, because you will be misunderstood. You will be called cold. You will be labeled as having changed, as distant. But you understand, these are just the last projections, screaming before they dissolve. The manipulator will try everything to pull you back into this old role. They will use emotion. They will use guilt. They will use silence. But this time, you will not react. You will simply smile, not out of pride, but because you have awakened. There comes a moment when silence is no longer just the absence of words. It becomes a presence, a force, a declaration. When you stop reacting, stop chasing, stop explaining, you don't disappear. You begin to exist more deeply. And that depth is something most people are not prepared for. We live in a world that values noise, quick replies, immediate validation, loud opinions, constant presence. And in that chaos, silence becomes an act of rebellion. It unsettles people. It shifts dynamics. It challenges the rules of engagement. Because when you are silent, truly silent, not from fear or avoidance, but from clarity, you strip others of their ability to predict, control, or manipulate you. People don't panic when you speak. They panic when you don't. When you don't respond to provocation. When you don't explain your every move. When you no longer play the role they've assigned to you. That's when the masks start to fall. That's when relationships are tested. That's when true faces are revealed. Carl Jung understood this power. He saw silence not as emptiness, but as space, sacred space, where the self could regenerate, where clarity could emerge, and where healing could finally begin. Distance, then, is not always a rupture. It is often a womb, a place of rebirth. When you step back, not out of anger, but out of wisdom, you allow the chaos to settle. You allow emotions to stabilize. You create room for discernment. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You begin to return to yourself. You hear your own voice again. You remember your boundaries. You realign with your truth. Silence gives birth to sovereignty. But be warned, this journey is not comfortable. It will trigger guilt. People will accuse you of being cold, distant, arrogant. They will demand explanations. They will try to guilt you back into the role that benefited them. You will feel the pull. You will want to clarify, to fix, to return to how things were. But don't. That discomfort is not a signal to go back. It's a sign that you are growing. Because true transformation requires isolation. Not the kind that comes from loneliness, but the kind that comes from intentional solitude. Jung called this sacred isolation, the necessary space where you no longer define yourself through the eyes of others, but through the depth of your own soul. And that is when rebirth begins. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak to express, not to impress. You no longer react to be accepted. You respond only when it aligns with your peace. You no longer chase connection. You attract alignment. Your silence becomes your sanctuary. Your distance becomes your power. Your absence becomes your presence. Those who never valued you will fade. Those who only needed you will fall away. And those who truly see you, they will remain. This is the paradox. The more unavailable you become, the more valuable you are. Not because you are playing hard to get, but because you are no longer giving yourself away cheaply. You understand that your energy is sacred, that your time is limited, that your presence is earned. And when you live from that truth, you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. It radiates from your silence. It echoes in your absence. It speaks without sound. This is not about arrogance. It's about self-respect. It's not about indifference. It's about discernment. It's not about superiority. It's about self-ownership. You don't owe the world your constant availability. You don't owe people explanations for your boundaries. You don't need to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. Silence is your sword. Distance is your shield. Presence is your gift. Use them wisely, honor them fully, and most importantly, protect them fiercely. When you've been silent long enough, when you've stepped away from unnecessary conversations, from draining relationships, from emotional loops that wear you out, something profound begins to happen. Solitude. Not ordinary loneliness, but the solitude of the awakened self. It's a quiet realization that you no longer belong to the places you used to, no longer resonate with old connections, no longer get swept away by the same distractions. You find yourself spending more time alone, not because you've been abandoned, but because you've chosen distance. Not because you hate the world, but because you need space to hear your own soul again. And in that silence, a new kind of peace is born. A peace that doesn't need to be loud. A peace that isn't dependent on praise, nor shaken by rejection. A peace that comes from knowing who you are and no longer needing to prove it to anyone. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. When you begin to look inward, you see yourself more clearly, but you also see the chaos you once tolerated. You see the times you forced a smile just to keep harmony, the relationships you maintained out of fear of being alone, the times you reacted just to feel seen or valued. You don't live that way anymore. You've learned to stay silent when nothing needs to be said. You've learned to walk away when respect is no longer mutual. You've learned to protect your energy like a sacred treasure. But in return, you will feel alone, because you will lose people who were once there, not because they were bad, but because you've changed. You will no longer fit into the social circles that once made you feel safe. You will no longer be able to share everything with everyone like before. And in that space, you must learn one thing: how to befriend yourself. No more seeking validation from the outside. No more needing someone to fill the gaps. No more living according to anyone else's expectations. You begin to rewrite your definition of happiness. You begin to touch the deeper layers of your being. You're no longer just living. You begin to truly exist. And then, the most miraculous thing happens. You become the source of peace for yourself. No one can take that away. No one can manipulate you through silence. No one can shake you just by pulling away, because now you are no longer dependent on the external world to feel whole. You are yourself. You are enough. You are grounded. This is freedom. This is power. This is a new beginning, not of a new person, but of the return to the original self you had forgotten. And from that place, you no longer run from solitude. You smile at it. You know, those who truly awaken always go through a period of isolation before they touch the light within. You're no longer afraid of losing relationships, because you know what's truly meant for you will never leave when you live in your truth. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood, because you understand. Inner clarity matters more than outer approval. You're no longer afraid of being absent in someone else's story, because you are fully present in your own. And so, you enter a new season of life, a journey no longer loud, no longer rushed, no longer lived to please, only with peace, only with awareness, only with wholeness from within. Are you ready? Because this is the true beginning. If this message touched you, leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next profound reflections. Thank you for being here, fully, completely as you are.